Welcome to the Oswego Alumni Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Perkins. Imagine being an Oswego grad and learning so much about business and accounting that you're asked back to be an adjunct professor 15 years later. Chris Hoch was happy to make the jump from student to professor, and he's currently the director of risk management at Raymore and Flanagan Furniture and Mattresses. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Dee. Happy to be here.
I know I just scratched the surface. You're like, oh my God, there's so much more about me. But we start with a little teaser, okay? To let everybody know the truth about us, Chris and I both serve on the board of Carrier Park. Before we get into your professional background and all the things you love about risk management, let's talk a little bit about Carrier Park and why was it important to you to be on that board?
I thought it was important to, as a lot of things, is to give back and be connected with our local community. This was a tremendous opportunity to partner with some great people on the board and great people within the community to try to build and expand upon the success that was currently undertaking at Carrier Park.
Yeah, we just want to let people know we know each other.
Correct.
And it is a project that is near and dear to my heart because Syracuse Challenger Baseball will one day very soon, we are talking next year, 2026, we will be playing at that park instead of three different locations around town. So I want to personally thank you for all the work you've done for it.
Happy to do it. I really am happy to be part of such a great group and looking forward to the next stages.
So let's get to Oswego. What is your Oswego origin story? What made you decide to go to school at Oswego?
This is really interesting. I was finishing up at Herkimer County Community College, and I was looking at a couple different schools. And Oswego County being an area that I was partially raised in, it was just being part of the Oswego State uh, community was just something I always thought I wanted to do. And I was looking at different programs and different schools. And there was a program at SUNY Oswego I was interested in. And initially it was to go into possibly as a business major, but also I was looking at considering double majoring into voc business education to be essentially a business teacher at a high school. And I took a course and I had to do some work in the course and outside assignments, meet with other teachers, business teachers. And during those assignments, I was talking with one in particular, and she said, "You do realize you're going to need your master's if you go into this field. You're going to need a master's in education in order to become a teacher after a period of time." And I was thinking, and I said, well, why don't I just finish up my undergraduate in business and then go on to get a business graduate degree? And I was kind of going back and forth if I really wanted to do that. What else was I going to do? But the one thing that stuck in my mind was it, I think, helped make the decision. And I've shared it with some other faculty at SUNY Oswego, and I've shared it with some friends and colleagues, is I actually went to elementary school at a school called Campus that was on SUNY Oswego back in the 70s and early 80s. And I went to elementary school in first and second grade. And the real interesting story is that kind of drew me back to drew my interest back to SUNY Oswego. And plus, I knew they had phenomenal programs. They had, at the time, I knew they had a great education program that was renowned, at least in the immediate area. And I knew from my research in Herkimer, they had a really good up and coming business program. And I say up and coming because I didn't know much about it. And so I applied and I met with someone from admissions. And really that started the process. And one of my roommates at the time was thinking about going to another school that I was looking at. And him and his parents went to SUNY Oswego. And he said, we really like the school. And I said, well, I think I made my decision. I'm going to transfer to SUNY Oswego. Lo and behold, he transferred to SUNY Oswego. He had a friend that was from his hometown that was going into his senior year that lived in SUNY Oswego. So it really set up some good arrangements for us. And I had friends in the area. It was a familiar area. But the whole thing that just kept coming back to me was, I actually started my elementary school there.
You got to tell me about this. This is the first I've ever heard of it. Where on campus was there an elementary school?
It was it was called Campus, and believe it or not, it was in Sweatman Hall.
Ah, makes
And
sense.
the really interesting part of the whole thing, and I have, like I said, shared this with some colleagues there, is my last class of elementary school, the last classroom, literally, and I remember the view. It looked like there was a big hill out back, in which there wasn't. It was probably a small incline we would slide on. Was actually the last class of my classroom for my undergraduate business degree.
Oh my God. So you finished where you started.
And it was never planned. It was really, it's comical. It's fascinating. But yeah, and I actually shared that with my professor who is still there. I shared it with him several years ago when I was leaving class. Actually, I was on my way to class and I stopped and I saw him there and I spoke with him and I said, I just want to share something with you. I go, I may have back in 1998. I don't know. I said, but, I told him the story and he thought it was pretty interesting.
No wonder why you have so much pride about Oswego. It's not only that you went there, it's not only that you currently teach there, you went to grade school there. Who
Yeah,
t- who taught the children? Was it um, students who were going for education degrees?
I don't know all the ins and outs. I do know that there was a lot of student teaching done there, but there was also teaching. There was counselors. There was speech therapists. It was a full school, and I can still remember the what was the gymnasium. I mean, it's still there. It's there's been a lot of work there, but it's just interesting. Yeah, it's to go through and just rethink all that. It's interesting, it's fun, it's rewarding, and as you get move on with age, you think of just how things come together, and you don't even realize it, you don't even plan it.
Is that still going on? Do they still have campus on campus?
No, that ended. I believe it was maybe 1978, 79, or 80.
Ah, okay, that would explain why I've never heard of it. Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, it was something.
So back to your story. You graduate with a BS, right?
Bachelor's in Business Administration, yes.
Okay. Your resume reads a lot of risk management. That's where you kind of staked your claim. How did you find out about risk management and how did it become kind of your life's work?
When I was finishing up Oswego, my interest at the time shifted towards human resources. And I obviously taking human resource courses, you learn a little bit about benefits, you learn a little bit about compensation, you learn about the different attributes of items under human resources. And one of it that I kind of learned to touch on was some labor law, because that was one of my most interesting courses, and we can get into that after. But I interviewed for a commercial insurance company that the position was for workers' compensation claims adjuster. And during the interview process, I understood and learned what was expected, and a lot of it was communicating and calculating payrolls, determine what claims should be accepted, what claims should not be accepted, investigations. And so that I was offered the job, and that was really the introduction to me to the insurance world. And I worked handling workers' compensation claims for a few years, a couple different states, and then I was offered an opportunity to go over to another department handling commercial auto claims, also some product liability claims, and some general liability claims. The product was really few and far between, or it might be sitting with more experienced adjuster, learning a little bit about it. But it was all really facets of claims and insurance. And I did that for about 6.5 years, and I was taking some MBA courses, in between. And then I was seeking out another opportunity and ended up eventually landing my first risk management position.
So, what does a risk management person do?
It it really does vary depending on the industry. The risk management I've been heavily involved with over years, it's really a combination to try to put it very easily, a combination of finance, human resources, and insurance to protect property, preserve resources, and transfer risk out to other avenues.
Oh, wow. That's the definition.
It's not necessarily the textbook definition, but that in summary, that's kind of how I explain it, and in a way that may be the easiest way to understand and digest.
You have a passion for this. I know that's some of the work that you do on campus now is teaching this. Why should either parents who are listening or students who are listening, why should they be excited about this field? Why should they want to get into it?
It, it's it's a field with endless opportunity, and such transferable knowledge. The field is everly growing across so many different sectors. Risk management insurance doesn't just touch um, the finance sector. It just doesn't touch the banking sector. It just doesn't touch the education sector, the hospitality sector. It affects all sectors, and it's continuing to evolve. And what we see across the world, supply chain risk, a lot of geopolitical risk, a lot of different risks come into play in businesses on an everyday basis. And it's exciting to understand it, when you really start sitting down and looking at the industry that you're in and try to understand the risk in those industry and ways to try to mitigate those. And then when you are talking with individuals in the industry or the organizations you work with, or students who are interested and want to know more about it, and you're having the conversation and a dialogue, the bells start going off, lights start coming on. It's like, oh, I didn't think that. Oh, that sounds interesting. And it's very rewarding. It's been many years now, and my enthusiasm continues only to grow because I also search out opportunities to learn more about other areas of risk, other industries of risk, and how that ties back. Because a lot of the risk theoretically may be similar across industries, but from a practicality standpoint, they could be far different.
So when you were working in insurance, you eventually made the jump back into education, also working in risk management. Tell us a little bit about your job at the Syracuse City School District.
That was a really fun introductory risk management position for me to start with. Um, Trying to learn the various risk in school districts, coming from a commercial insurance company, it took some patience. It took a lot of planning. It took a lot of collaboration. It took a lot of listening. You're going into an industry that you're not completely familiar with, public education. And you're coming from a private sector. Do you understand, all the variables, all the players, all the components? And then how do you learn those players and those components? And then how do you build those relationships to establish not just a relationship, but partnerships? And then continue to learn and grow, with the others that you're working with. And it's really nonstop. And you have to lean on others. You have to understand, especially when you're new to the business, new to the industry, that someone is going to say no. And you may not always understand why, but if you can learn why, you can understand someone else's view, and just understanding someone else's view can help you think differently to try to get something more accomplished. Ultimately, having the thought of having a positive impact on the business and the position you're in.
Can you give us a concrete example of, I don't know if you're allowed to, of something you did on a daily basis in the school side of things? Because I'll ask you about your current position after that.
I mean, one of the things that we did as a group is, how do we try to keep the environment and our employees safe, free from injuries? How can we partner and collaborate and use all the partners, internal partners, external partners? It could be insurance company, it could be internal leadership, it could be individuals who are trained in different areas. It could be de-escalation. It could be um, psychology. How do you leverage the resources internally and externally you have to try to decrease exposures that you may see in that industry? And in education, it's human capital. I mean, that's our folks on, in our schools, students, the parents, the teachers, the custodial staff, the security, the food service. Everyone has equal part in the process of trying to help each other and maintain a healthy educational environment.
When you talk about something this grand, it almost sounds like, you're the top administrator for the district. We know that's not the case, but I imagine, is that who you would report to?
No, I didn't. I was far from the top administrator. I would report to middle to senior management. And the good thing is everyone really had an open door policy, and we would present information to the public. There was regular reports that would go um, to senior management. There was presentations done on a regular basis. It was very open, very thorough, and it was a great learning experience. It really, really was. And it really opened my eyes to different areas of where risk management can go
So,
with very little experience at the time as well. So it was, how do I continue to grow and learn, and what other things do I need to do? Which encouraged me then to go back to school to learn additional information.
so you make the jump from education, a couple of jobs in education, to now one of the largest retailers for furniture and mattresses in the area, and they are just growing by leaps and bounds everywhere I go. I see Raymore and Flanagan. Were there skills that you learned in education that were transferable to a completely different business?
Well, I think there was just knowledge that was gained through various educational programs that I elected to enroll in while I was at Syracuse, and thereafter. I wanted to make sure I was obtaining additional information and knowledge in analytics, finance. I held a temporary role as a treasurer for local township for a period of time, because I really felt I needed additional finance experience. Um, and then I also enrolled into a school administration program because I wanted to really gain that additional knowledge of leadership. And I think through those prior positions and those education programs, I think that helped lead me into the role I'm currently serving.
So, what's the difference in what you do on a daily basis at your current job than what you did before?
Um, Theoretically, there's a lot of different similarities. It really is. You're collaborating with people. You're trying to preserve resources. You're trying to think critically. You're trying to solve problems. You're trying to be proactive. A lot of times it's different sectors and different sizes of organizations. And that's one of the things I've explained to friends, colleagues, and students is, when you have a passion for something like risk management or any program, any profession, if you think outside the box, think critically, and say, how can I tie this back to other industries? And then you start thinking about the different exposures, different opportunities within those industries. Things can start to come together to understand it, and it actually makes it fun. At least it does for myself.
So what's on your docket for today? What are you working on today?
I
I'd have to kill you. I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you.
um,
What is something you can talk about?
Well, I mean, there's from a risk management standpoint, there's a lot of planning. How do you look at exposures and how do you formulate partnerships with others? How do you put plans in place to try to reduce opportunities of loss? And then when losses do happen, how do you collaborate with others? How do you make decisions to mitigate that loss? In every industry, those, unfortunately, losses happen. Um, car car accidents. We all seen the very unfortunate bridge that was struck some time ago. You see these exposures and these losses, and then there's a lot of planning of, how do we avoid something like that, or how does another company avoid something like that? And then, what other exposures are out there that we may not know about? And those are the things that, sometimes when I'm bored, I'm like looking at different opportunities outside of the industry I'm in that I can try to learn about and try to better understand, and then say, how can I look at a result that someone else did or another company did and say, oh, how can this possibly help me here? Or how can I bring something like that into a classroom and have a good discussion and critical thinking over it?
Mhm. I think the reason why I'm pressing you on what you do on a daily basis is a lot of us, including me, like to think that you're in the showroom and just, rolling around the couches and the mattresses and, bouncing on the big chairs. That's what I would do on my lunch hour.
The stores are beautiful, and I can't imagine they'd want me jumping on them, but um, the stores are beautiful, and it's where I purchase my stuff, my household items, well before I started here as well.
Hmm. And nice people to work for, I'm sure.
Um, Tremendous, tremendous. It's a blessing.
So I know what's really in your heart and soul is the teaching of things. Tell me, 15 years ago, Oswego calls and says, we really like you to teach. How did you progress from, teaching at the BA level to now in the graduate level?
It was interesting. I received a call that the college was starting a risk management and insurance program. And I was just asked if I would be willing to take some time and have a conversation, about what I did and the position I was in, my experience, what my thoughts are on a program such as this. And so I started dialogue with a few individuals from the college. And then in 2013, I was asked if I was interested to teach a course. And although I was a little bit nervous, I jumped at it. I said, this is a great opportunity. Um, and so that was in the fall of 2013. And it's been ever since. And it's been a number of different courses. We've piloted some courses in the past just to see what students' feedback may be. But it's been great to really help students understand risk management insurance. And even if they're not majors or minors, I've had a number of students over the years just say, this is great information. I can take this information, even though I may be a math major, or maybe a science major, or maybe a psychology major. And they have an interest in it. And like I said before, risk management insurance really does tie to all businesses, all industries. And to have the opportunity to introduce new things and see an interest, and even if there's not a large interest in understanding, And they might want to know more. It may not be the favorite course, but they may want to know more. That means that what I'm trying to accomplish and those I'm trying to reach, which are, every student in the class at the during the semester, is, some of that is coming to light. And it's fun. And I can't say how many students I've collaborated with, over the past 12 years now, um, to offer opportunities for them to be introduced to people in the industry, organizations, events, internships, job openings. And when you see that happening in real time and you have conversations and you hear the excitement, you see the smiles, and I mean, there's a number of students I could go to my phone and I could text today, hey, how's it going? It'd be great to hear from you. And I would hear back or send an email, how's this going? And I still have students sometimes, former students, hey, I'm thinking about making a career move. Do you have a couple minutes? I'd like to discuss this with you. And knowing it's been 12 years and these conversations are still going on, it's very rewarding, and it's priceless.
How many people you must be so thrilled at the opportunity to almost change lives. But you probably have these classrooms, and there's some kids who are just hanging on your every word. They're hanging on your every word. And then there are other kids who are probably like half asleep and looking at their phone, chat GPTing. um, how do you know who's going to work? You have these connections in the industry. How do you know who's going to work at a specific organization? And, how do you decide to make those connections? How does that work?
Well, number one, I really don't know who's going to work and who's not. I just know when I see the hard work and the enthusiasm, there's a good probability that if they take advantage of their strengths and the network that they're working with, there's a good chance that they could have an opportunity. And if they take advantage of that opportunity, they have a very good chance of being successful. And they're hard workers. Um, and if they're coming to me and we're having dialogue about these opportunities and they're driven, and I make a connection with them, and I introduce them. That's really up to them at this point. Yeah, but if they're taking that step and they have that desire and drive, I can't see why any of them wouldn't be successful.
So,
It doesn't mean every job's going to be a fit for anyone. But it's interesting from some students who are, that have really raised the ranks in some of the organizations, some, the different occupations. Some people have gone into the insurance industry. I know a student who was going to leave the industry and go into the education industry and wanted to talk to me. And it was ironic because I had a little education background. And I know someone who was thinking about going into the education industry and said, well, wait a second, no, okay, I'm going to go into the risk management insurance industry. And reaching out and still having conversations and, sending an email or, how's it going? And like I said, 12 years later, and you still communicating with some students is great. And, even this past semester, finding out another student, landed a job at a local insurance company. I had a great opportunity. I was invited by that insurance company to go meet that particular student with some people from the organization and also another former student who's working there and have lunch. That was great.
So we were talking earlier about the Oswego family and how it seems like once one person is in a company and they're from Oswego, it's like, whoo, all of a sudden everyone seems to be from Oswego. Are you finding that in the companies that you kind of work with?
Yes, it's, when I was working for the Syracuse schools, there was a number of individuals who were coming in from SUNY Oswego, whether it was student teaching or individuals who had been there for a while, or they went to SUNY Oswego for the education program. There's a certification program, a master's level certification program at SUNY Oswego, and so I saw the the volume at when I was with Syracuse Schools, number of individuals who were from a lot of the local colleges, but there was a large number from SUNY Oswego. But where I currently work, a number of individuals from SUNY Oswego, and it's interesting. I see the blue and gold, blue and yellow, and I'm like SUNY Oswego. And the other day, I forget exactly where it was. I think I was at a local store, and I saw someone coming out and I almost bumped into each other and just turned around and I said, "Sorry, SUNY Oswego." It was just like one of those gotcha moments. So it was kind of funny.
Green and gold.
Green and gold.
We're gonna forgive you that because a little secret about Chris is he's one of the few people I know who has experience at the three biggest colleges in Central New York. So you have a degree from SU, from Lemoyne. It's a certificate, I think, from Lemoyne, and the degree from Oswego. Correct?
My degree from SUNY Oswego undergraduate, the master's in business administration at Lemoyne, my certificate of advanced study at Lemoyne, and I did doctoral work at Syracuse University, never finished.
Oh, okay. So just remember, this is the Oswego podcast. What would you say are the differences on those three colleges for people who are maybe looking, taking those college tours? What would you say the differences are?
I mean, I think the biggest noticeable difference is the lake. I have to be honest. The lake. I mean, all three schools are great. When I was at SUNY Oswego, again, it was near and dear. Knowing that I started my elementary school there, the classroom sizes were great. I won't say the names, but there's a couple professors in a couple of particular classes that really stand out to me. I can remember so much about them. One professor's still there, and the other, if I didn't take that particular course, I don't think I would have landed my first job out of SUNY Oswego. I really don't, because I recall to this day some of the questions that were asked in that interview, and my responses were reflective of what I was learning in that class.
Wow. There are other majors, and there are people who go to Oswego and they don't really know what they're going to do. A lot of people go in there and they think communications. A lot of people go in there and think education because that's their exposure. They've been in school, so they think school's a, good career path. What would you say to people who think they're already going in that direction, and how do you convince them to take a class like yours?
That's a great question. I would convince students to take classes that they're not completely sure about outside of their major, that is completely different. And I say that I recall taking a class, theater, when I was at Oswego, and I said it's completely out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to do this. I want to understand what it is. I don't think I'll like it. I loved it. And so to answer your question, I would encourage students in any major to seriously think about taking courses outside of their major, courses that may have nothing to do with their major, just to widen their horizon on what opportunities may be out there for them. I was talking to a student from another college not too long ago, and again, he was asking me what I do, what my day is like, different things within the business. And he said, that's very interesting. I never would have thought about that. He goes, I really I think I'm going to learn more about this. And so we'll see. It was not a student from SUNY Oswego, but just a younger person asking me about the profession. And I would encourage them. And I would also encourage individuals to have conversations with people from other organizations outside of their major, so they can just learn a little bit more about the industries, opportunities, and the details of those occupations outside of what their focus or major or interest may be.
So remember when you said you wouldn't name those professors? So the last question is always, if you were to win an Oscar or whatever the big award is of your industry, Who would you thank in your acceptance speech? And it's totally appropriate to name the professors who helped you along the way.
One professor that, like I said, really stuck out was Dr. Spaceman. He was in the economics department. He took labor law, and that course, and it was interesting when I was working on my master's in business administration, and I actually reached out to him because I had a couple questions, and this was, I think, 7, 8 years later. I reached out to him because I had a couple questions on a paper I was writing on. But that class and the critical thinking and the preparation that I learned from that class, I really believe helped me with my first position out of SUNY Oswego.
All right. Well, where can students or alumni follow your journey, and how can they follow you online?
I am on LinkedIn, and I would welcome anyone to reach out at any time, and I'll be happy to connect, happy to have any conversations. I'm also connected with the Alumni Association at SUNY Oswego. My contact information is there as well.
Notice how I say Oswego and you say Oswego.
And perhaps that is because I maybe spent so much time there in my younger years.
Yeah, that you're actually speaking like someone who lives there, whereas I'm speaking like somebody who doesn't.
I recall hearing this in the past.
Well, listen, thank you again for spending time with us. If you would like to share a guest idea from over our 95,000 alumni, you can reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or email us at alumni@oswego.edu. I'm Dee Perkins, and this has been the Oswego Alumni Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Oswego Alumni Podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Oswego Alumni Association, SUNY Oswego, or any of its officials. Email us with guest ideas or any other feedback at alumni@oswego.edu.